Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 25. We made it to 25. Can you imagine that? 25 weeks in a row, 25 guests. I am excited today to have on this gentleman. He is not an endorser, but he is the man, as it is known in the drum building industry. I'm going to actually send an invite Cooper to join our live video, our interview today. I appreciate him taking time out of building drums at the factory to spend some time and talk about building drums at the Gretsch USA. I sent you a request, Paul, and we are connecting. You're in the inner sanctum. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Pretty good for an analog guy, right? This is easy enough.
Yeah, I've had a Instagram account, but I'm not sure if I've ever really used it before today. So.
No, and I'm glad that you put a profile picture up there. This is good. It's like I can take, and that's okay. A lot of folks are too busy living their lives to live their lives virtually. And everybody's joining here. People are like, Coop. Joe Matz is here. Charlie Cooley is here. My friend Ralph Allman's here. Gretsch here. The folks at Gretsch here are here. So, how are things with you, my friend?
We're doing very well. We're busy as we can be, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
And,
is this a busy time of year?
It seems like every time is a busy time of year for us these days. So that's a really good thing.
That's good to hear. Man, That's awesome. Now, you're the director of operations. Over the years, I think I've actually called you the production manager or referred to you as that, not realizing that I think it was 8 years ago or something like that. You now have the title of director of operations. What does that actually mean?
It means I'm the guy that cleans the bathrooms, really. No. In all seriousness, it just means that I'm directing the place and basically in charge of pretty much everything goes on here, which over the years, I've had several different titles here, ranging from, I was a salesperson when I first started with the Gretsches, and then I became production supervisor, then sometime in there I became production manager, and then many moons ago I became the director of operations. So.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm telling you, well, you're definitely referred to as the guy, and you're responsible for an awful lot of good that has occurred over the last couple of decades that you've been there. So are you still hands-on building the drums or doing things with the drums?
Well, absolutely. A lot of times, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but sometimes if we have people not show up for work, I fill in. And generally, I really enjoy doing that, to be honest with you.
Yes.
But if there's an issue with a kit, generally I'm involved. If there's maybe a kit for somebody super special or something, not that I mean everybody's super special, but some high-level artist or something, I certainly get my hands all over that. And I still at the ripe age of 61, enjoy buffing drums, which my wife thinks I'm crazy for that.
I wouldn't have given you 61. I was trying to. You said an analog guy, and I'm like, you're not much older than I am. So you look great. Must be the silver sealer in the air, right?
Yeah, it's a silver sealer and all the dust. So
that's amazing. Where did you grow up, Paul? Where are you from?
I was actually born in Los Angeles and lived there till I was 10. Then I moved to Connecticut and lived there till I was 17. Then I moved to Tennessee and spent a number of years on the road with bands. Then I think when I was 25, I moved to Florida and got married. And then in 98, I moved to Savannah and started working for the Gretsches.
Wow, you've been all over the place. That's wow. I was wondering what the accent was. I couldn't tell if it was native to those parts there, but you've been there long enough, I guess. So
I've been in the southern part of the country since really 76. So, sometimes I do kind of fall into a little bit of an accent, and that's just from being here,
Right. Like when I was talking to Carl Brazil last week, and I was trying to say a couple of words, and he goes, "Is that your Manchester accent?" And I'm like, So Joe Matza says he misses hanging in that office, and of course he's from Connecticut, I believe.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, has definitely been involved in the with Gretsch drums. But anyway, so what did you do when you first started working for the Gretsch family?
Well, in '98, I was hired as a salesperson. So I want to say I started in May, like May 4th or 5th of 1998. So
Wow.
initially my job was to sell drums,
Okay.
and I did that. I think it was sometime in it was March of '99. I came up to the factory, and initially I was just kind of helping out, working on things like communication and documentation of what we were doing, that kind of stuff. But
Okay.
then I think it was in September of '99. Lena Gretsch had
Yep.
been running the factory, and Lena was pregnant, and so when she had her kid, I kind of assumed that position and have been there pretty much ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. Had you woodworking experience? Were you a hands-on kind of guy, a handy guy?
Well, I've always been pretty handy with stuff. I didn't have any drum building experience when I came to the factory,
Yeah.
other than really being a drummer my whole life and messing with drums at my house, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, I was very fortunate when I first started working here. It was a gentleman by the name of Gene Haw who had worked with Gretsch back in the Baldwin days, and then
Wow.
when Mr. Gretsch bought it back, Gene worked. When I got here, he was like a consultant. So we would see Gene a couple weeks every other month or something, and I really learned most of the things about building drums that I know from Gene. And just a
That's
wonderful guy. I'm still in touch with him, and he was a great guy. I think he started with Baldwin in '66. So, and I think
wow.
I'm not quite sure how old Gene is now, but he's on up there and still doing very well.
That's
But
amazing. Wow.
yeah, and there's a core group of people that many of whom are still here that all worked with Gene too. So as far as product knowledge and how to build things, really Gene was responsible for a lot of that.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, had you ever cut a bearing edge before you had worked there?
No,
Anything? I know you'd messed
no,
on
I
a
never have.
drum because that scares the daylights out of me. I see friends of mine saying, "Oh, I have no problem." I have a friend who just installed some legs on his floor toms, and I'm like, I don't want to drill. I just don't.
Right.
I'd rather wait and send it to you guys or somebody
Yeah.
that knows what they're doing. But had you ever cut a bearing edge?
I had never cut one before I came up here. No. And
That's scary.
all those processes, everything we do here, we try to emulate the same processes that they used in the 1960s. So,
Yeah.
in the case of bearing edges, when I first got here, we were using the same table that they used to use. That machine came from the Brooklyn factory, and I believe they used to do edges on it. But that's something that does take some training. I mean, there's definitely a learning curve on cutting bearing edges and being able to do it well, anyways.
How do you teach somebody that not on necessarily a shell that you're going to be selling, correct?
Yeah, well, and if you're training somebody how to cut edges, initially you're going to find a scrap shell and, let them get the feel of it that before you let them loose on somebody's drum. Yeah.
Did didn't you make a jig or something like that that cuts? When I was at the factory, you showed me something that you built.
No, that you might be referring to the our snare bed jig,
That's what it is.
which Gene made, and I think
Oh,
they started using that in '87, and we're still using it today. So obviously it was a well built jig. But I mean,
that's amazing.
I have made jigs over the years for different things in the drilling area and whatnot. But I think the one you're talking about was one of Gene's jigs.
Right, looks like a wooden
Yeah,
kind of. I don't even
yeah.
describe that. That's pretty awesome. I'm telling you, I still have my face still hurts when I think about how much I smiled during the tour when I was at the factory there a couple of years ago. Man, going on 3, I can't believe that. And then it was just so amazing seeing the different shells from the three different series. Can you describe what makes up the different shells that you have there?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, you know, the USA Custom shell is the same as it's been since really the mid 50s when Gretsch went to a 6-ply shell. And so the outside ply and the very inside ply are maple, and the 4 inner plies are gum.
Okay.
And so
Wow.
over the years, well, when I first started working here, Jasper was making the shells, and then they went out of business, and we went to Keller, and it actually took them a little bit of time to get it right. And you know, they build the shells just for us. It's a proprietary formula per se, and they do a really good job with it. But the Brooklyn shell, which we came out with the Brooklyn series in 2012, it's very close to the same layup as the USA shell, only instead of gum, it's got poplar in it, right?
Right.
So there's a little bit of difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people say they sound, you know, if you put die-cast hoops on a Brooklyn 8x12, it might sound a little USA custom-ish, right?
Right.
But and they're very similar, and likewise, it's a different version of that great Gretsch sound. Then we at the very end of 2014, we came out with the Broadcaster, the 3-ply drums, and that whole series kind of evolved from I had bought a 1947 kit on eBay for I think $900, and the kit was all water damaged. It was in horrible shape, and I brought it up here and worked on it for about, I don't know, a couple months it took to get the shells right. But once I had them assembled, I had them set up in my living room at home, and I'll never forget. I started playing them, and my wife Amy was in the other room on the computer, and she came running around like, "Holy crap, those drums sound good," you know? And they did. They sounded amazing, and that's what really inspired me to go after the 3-ply shells. And that series has done very well, and it's almost like I've heard people describe, and I agree with them. You know, the USA Custom is very focused, the original great Gretsch sound from the 60s, you know,
Yeah.
that 6-ply sound. People will describe the Brooklyn as a little bit more aggressive sounding because you've got the 302 hoop on there and it's a little more open. And then the Broadcasters come along and they're maybe the warmest of the three. And to me, the Broadcasters kind of sound like a brand new 60-year-old drum set. You know, they've got a round over edge on them, which is really
Yeah.
very low tech for today's world of
Right.
precision everything. But those drums sound really amazing. And of course, I'm a fan of all three, obviously. But,
Yep. Wow. And ever since hearing your Broadcaster kit, that the one that you refurbed there, it's a white marine pearl, right? Was it
yeah,
20?
Well, the
I'm
26,
telling you,
yeah.
I've been looking all week, looking on eBay for 1940s Gretsch drums, and all I can find are ones with tacked on bottom heads, which I don't want. But that kit sounds unbelievable. That was on a video, the Gretsch Mini Museum that
Yeah.
an Indonesian drummer put up.
Right, yeah.
And man, oh man, that drum set. Have you ever played that kit?
No, I never have.
Might be smart to not.
Because I just don't want, you know, something to happen to it, really. And also, I don't know a lot of gigs I could play around here in Savannah where it would warrant a 26-inch bass drum. That might be a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's true. Now, your favorite kit, I think, is known as is the burnt orange kit. What is that one?
Well, yeah, my burnt orange kit is really a combination of a bunch of onesies I picked up over the years. And, you know, there's some 80s in there, there's some 90s in there, and some current, you know, modern day, probably 2010, I think, is when I actually did my 18x22. But that's something about that drum set. It's just very comfortable for me to play, and I love the way it looks. And, you know, I'm a burnt orange freak. I think I have 17 burnt orange drums at my house. And
Wow.
I've been collecting them really for the last 22 years.
No,
But,
Amy knows. right? When she watches this, she's going to know that you have 17.
Oh, she knows.
I'm just kidding. That is neat. Now, do you go home from working all day and all week and still get excited when you whack those beautiful Gretsch drums that you have at home? Or do
Yeah,
you need a break?
no, for me, it's almost like playing drums is therapy, right? And mental
Yeah,
therapy. So
yeah,
there's nothing better for me if I've had a long day or you're worn out or whatever to just go play drums for, even if it's just 20 minutes. If you can get an hour in, that's awesome. But if you get 20
yeah,
minutes in, it's almost like when you're done, you feel like yourself again. Kind of
yeah.
clears the mind out. So I try to play every day.
Hmm.
Probably in reality, I probably end up playing my drums at least 5 days a week, something like that.
For you. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Let's talk about your playing career. I mean, how much, like, what you started playing, you were on the road, you were saying, with
Yeah.
the band. What kind of playing were you doing early on?
Well, I started playing drums when I was 10, and I lived in Connecticut. And fortunately for me, my next door neighbor was a public school music teacher, and they got me involved in the Eastern Connecticut Youth Symphony and all that. So I took lessons all through high school. Then I went to the University of Tennessee at Martin, in Martin, Tennessee, not Knoxville, on a musical scholarship, and I did that for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was going to be a high school band director, but
Wow.
my my instructor, this lady Nancy Matheson, her and my mom both convinced me that I should drop out of college and go on the road with the band because I really wasn't interested in college. And it was kind of funny because my mother was a professor at the university, and so both these two professors were like, "Paul, why don't you go on the road with this band?" So that was in '78, I believe, towards the end of
Yeah.
'78, and I was on the
Wow.
road until '85, and really just playing all over the United States. I think we played in 32 or 33 states, and
Wow.
mostly
What band
mostly
was
bars. Well, one of the
Yep.
bands was named Raisin Cane, was the first one, and the other one was a band called the Windows. And like many people, I got really burned out on the road, and I fell in love with Amy at the time. So she was living in Miami, so I moved down to Miami, and
Wow.
rest is history from there.
That is amazing. So
Yeah.
after you kind of got off the road, what kind of things were you doing?
Well,
Like
it was kind of
wise and
funny.
playing wise?
I really wasn't playing much because I just had a kid, so I didn't gig at all for probably 10 years at least, and I got into working at record stores. Okay, and I ended up being a district manager for a huge record store chain based out of Albany, New York, and I did that for 13 years between the time I got off the road and went to work for Mr. Gretsch. So
Wow, what a life.
yeah,
Man, and we've only scratched the surface too of the playing experiences
yeah.
and as well as working for the Gretsch family and whatnot. Let's go back a little bit to the oh sorry, okay, let's what kind of playing are you doing these days or what were you doing before the COVID thing
Well,
happened?
prior to COVID, I played in several different bands in Savannah because Savannah has a great music scene. There's tons of bars that have bands. Or this was all pre-COVID. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
few gigs are few and far between these days due to COVID. But I played regularly in probably three bands, and then I probably filled in about eight other ones maybe.
Wow.
And sometimes doing the fill-in thing is the best gig
Yeah.
because everything's new and
Yep.
expectations are kind of low, and you go in there and you do a good job, and some of those gigs are really some of my favorites actually.
Yeah. Yeah, they can be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
What are your
but it's all different kinds of music. I mean,
yeah.
I play with a country band, play with rock and roll bands. Uh, every once in a while, I do a lot of blues, and every once in a while, well, I used to take some straight ahead jazz gigs, but I realized I'm really not a very good jazz drummer, and it's really not my thing, so I really don't do that anymore. But
It's a challenging idiom, that's for sure.
yeah,
You've got to, yeah, to do it some justice. We have a great jazz drummer Watching right now, we have Anthony McKelly all the way in, well, sort of my neck of the woods, a couple of hours away. And he
Hmm.
was a guest early on in the program. And he's
Yeah.
fabulous drummer, no matter what style. What are some of the drummers, or who are some of the drummers that made you want to pick up the sticks?
Well, when I was younger, like a lot of people, it was really kind of a combination of, and this might be a strange combination, but Bonham, Moon, and the Allman Brothers. So somehow between that group of drummers is what got me into playing, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah, probably
Wow.
Bonham, maybe Bonham more than anybody, just because the way he sounded and the power he had and all that. But
Right, right. That's fabulous. Well, I was watching a video someone had posted of you playing. It was "Come Sail Away,"
all right.
and I can tell some of those drum fills were maybe a little moonish, a little bit of
Yeah.
little and that China cymbal.
All right.
Man, it was great, and it's really cool to see you play traditional grip too,
Yeah.
and tilt that snare drum. Out of any of the endorsers that you've built drums for, is there anybody that you're a little starstruck by?
I could only say most all of them.
Yeah,
That's I'll have to say that's one of the coolest things about my job is that over the years I've had been able to meet so many fantastic drummers. I mean, Vinny, Ferroni, Cindy, Stanton, Keith Carlock, and last year I got to meet Charlie Watts. That was amazing.
right.
You know, just it's amazing to meet those people because they do so much, and I respect them so much. I'm always a little starstruck.
For
Always.
sure.
Yeah.
I love that picture of you with Charlie. Where was that taken, and can you describe how it was, how the meeting was with him?
Yeah, that was. They were playing at the stadium the Jaguars play down in Jacksonville, which is about 2.5 hours south of here.
Yeah.
And Don McCauley was very gracious to invite us to come down. So Amy and I went down there. And I can only say, going backstage at that concert was just, the whole thing was surreal. Because we walked in the backstage area and, well, there's Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood. And then Charlie walks out of a little trailer and he was just the sweetest guy. And I was super nervous. But once we started talking about drums and drummers, it was just like you and me talking. I mean, he was such a sweetheart.
I've heard that he's said from John DeChristopher talking about Charlie and talking about
Yeah.
all of those Zildjian artists and that they're just so wonderful. What did you and Charlie actually talk about? Like anything specific?
Well, there was a couple things because he had been in New Orleans recently and had been hanging out with Stanton. And on my way down to the show, Stanton had called me and started talking about Charlie. So I started talking about Stanton. And there was one funny thing. I was in New Orleans for an event watching Stanton play at this little jazz place, and they had these little metal chairs in the balcony, and it was a very quiet passage. And I got up to go to the bathroom and knocked about 3 of these chairs over. And so Charlie and I talked about that a little bit because he remembered he was up in that balcony too when he was there. And I don't know that he knocked a chair over like I did, but he remembered that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Have you have you ever done any work specifically for Charlie? Build any drums for him?
Well, when I went to see him, we took a snare drum that everybody had signed, and
Oh,
we actually for the last tour, they were doing a little kind of almost scaled down acoustic thing at the end of the runway out in the audience, and we made
wow.
that kit for him, and I think we've made another one since of the replica of that same kit. And then years ago, he was doing something in New York, some kind of a piano thing, and we had made drums through Steve Maxwell, and he ended up playing one of those kits and liked it. But
Are they all the same sizes, same configurations, or were they
uh,
different?
no, they were. Interestingly enough, the kit that he used on the downstage thing was a 24. I think it was like a 12 or 10 by 24, and
Wow.
different sizes, completely different than his normal kit. And I think the one he played in New York was a straight up bebop kit. So
Unbelievable. I've never seen him play in person and would love to. He looks like he's not a basher by any stretch because he doesn't look like a very large man, but he seems to have such a great touch in a really lovely
yeah,
way, pulling the sound out of the drums. Did you notice anything? Were you
yeah.
close when you watched him play, or were you in?
Yeah, we were down front, kind of in the pit area, and it was the whole thing was surreal watching Charlie play because it doesn't look like he's beating the crap out of him or anything, but
Right.
the drums just sounded so huge. It just incredible, really. And his feel, of course, is very individual, and it was awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Does he always play that, lifting the right hand up on the 2 and the 4? Does he
Uh,
always do that?
well, that's kind of funny because I've been trying to figure that out for years, and I think it's just something that happens with him.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think he's thinking, when am I not going to hit the hi hat? I think it just happens. I don't know, but
Yeah, I remember reading an interview where he's saying, "Oh, do I do that? I didn't realize that I
yeah,
did
yeah,
that." But yeah, what an absolute legend! What a beautiful player! And I remember being a young drummer starting out, and people bashing him, saying, "Oh, that stuff is so easy and simple." And well, you know what? You play in the Rolling Stones, and you make it
yeah.
feel down that way, and then you can talk. But if anyone has any questions while we have Mr. Paul Cooper here, please type them out here, send them in, because this may be the only time that you're going to be able to directly ask him a question
Uh-huh.
rather than through email and whatnot. Um, can you talk a little bit about meeting Steve Ferroni? He's a drum hero of mine as well. I'd love to have
Yeah.
him on the program, absolutely. So, what about Steve? What was special about him?
Well, interestingly enough, back in the late 70s, I think it was 79 or 80 perhaps, I was in a band that was playing in this kind of a horrible club in Cleveland, Mississippi, and we warmed up for the Average White Band. So that was the first
Oh,
time I ever met Steve, and I was just in awe of him at that point. And years later, I think prior to him coming back to Gretsch, when he was still with Pearl, we had made him a kid because he was friends with Gretsch's. And I met him at an amp show, and I brought up Cleveland, Mississippi, and that place had a weird stage that was shaped like a boat. And so he started talking to me. I don't think he remembered me, but he certainly remembered that club because it was just a strange place. But he's always
that's
been
great.
such a genuinely sincere sweetheart. I just love him. He's a great guy.
Oh man, what an
Yeah, and
absolute
actually, hang on. Can I grab a good drum real quick?
yeah.
Because actually, right now, I'm about to
Oh,
redo. This is his Average White Band kit. So we're about to redo that for him. So these have been
that was
sitting in my office for a couple months, or a couple weeks anyways.
that was the kit that he had during that time.
Yeah, yeah,
The actual kit, he still has it.
yeah, yeah.
What are you going to do to that drum kit?
Well, we're going to rewrap it the same way it is, white with the black stripe. But there's certainly a bunch of holes that need to be filled before we do all that stuff. And,
Right.
refurbish it. I hadn't taken it apart and checked it out yet, so I'm not sure about what the edges look like or any of that stuff. But if the edges are fine, I'm not going to mess with them because
Really?
that's kind of my
Wow.
golden rule on if you're restoring somebody's drum set, well, don't overdo it,
Why do
Like,
so many? Well, I don't want to say local, but drum experts like to recut edges all the time. Oh no, let me redo those edges. They need freshening up. That makes me nervous. So
yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people that are into that, and there are drums out there made by any brand that might need to have the edge recut on it. So there's, it's definitely a
right,
service that should be done, given
yeah,
it needs to be done. Yeah.
right, right. So Gretsch Gear is asking, tell us something about the Gretsch Vineyard. What is that all about?
Well, the vineyard is an area that Mr. Gretsch has in the factory, that has shells back there from really very different eras. And I may be speaking out of school, but I think it goes back to the Baldwin era, or probably the older shells back there. And then there's stuff from then all the way to probably 2006 or so. And there's some leftover shells from the 100th anniversary in 1983, where there was
What?
Carpathian elm and
Really?
burl walnut. Yeah, there's some shells.
Is there
They,
enough of the other shells, the older shells, to make complete drum kits out of, or are they just kind of pieces?
well, there's probably a few kits worth back in there that could be done. A lot of the drum sizes are so finicky over the decades. So,
Yeah.
you might have a power tom here or a shallow tom here, whatever. So, but
That's amazing.
there's some beautiful shells back there for sure.
Wow, I didn't know that was actually like a large enough part of the fact. When I was there, I didn't see anything there. I was just
Hmm.
so interested in our tour. Anyway, maybe it's a good thing that I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
We have another question here saying, I want to know about Paul's thoughts on rims mounts versus direct to shell.
Oh,
Here we go.
I'm I'm a real kind of traditionalist, and the only way when people ask me that question, the only way I can ever respond is say that every tom tom I have has a bracket mounted directly to the shell.
Yeah.
And the only reason not the only reason, one of the reasons I do that is oftentimes, this is just my opinion, you see drummers out playing and they've got GTS or rims mount or whatever, suspension systems on them, but then you'll see they got a zero ring, or it's like almost like they profess that they want that so the drum's live, but then they deaden the drum. So to me,
Yeah.
I like it mounted directly to the shell. I kind of almost always have, and I want to say that, and I hope I'm not misquoting Vinny, but I think Vinny called it "no muss, no fuss," right?
Oh.
And likewise, you can position the drums a little closer together without a rim system on it. But I'm a huge proponent of mounting the bracket to the shell. Especially in a mic'd situation, people say
Oh,
it
yeah.
might deaden the shell, and it certainly might reduce a little bit of the resonance of the tom. But at the same time, you've got brackets with legs on it on your floor toms, so
That's true, right?
I
That's
mean,
true.
like you want your mounted toms to ring like hell, but your floor toms are going to sound, I don't know.
And then you tape them up anyway. As you said, you tape them,
Yeah,
or you put
yeah,
the
yeah,
drum dots or moon gels or whatever,
yeah,
or
yeah,
you wall it on the.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But
My
I'm
first Gretsch kit was direct to shell, and then I had them. It was
yeah,
1986. Of course, I had to get the rims mounts, and they never fit well, and you couldn't
mm-hmm.
put the mic on. So I think the next drum kit I order will definitely go direct to
Yeah.
shell. I really like those. That looks like the floor tom brackets. Those mounts that I've seen.
4825, yeah.
Right, the 4825. I think they look so classy on tom toms. Do you have that on your personal kits as well?
On some of the drums, yeah, yeah. Some of them I have that. Some of them I have the 9025. Some of them have the old spade plate with the vintage rail mount. That back to the subject, and I'll shut up after this on it. But it
This is
is,
good.
to me, I think some of the drum sounds that people have tried to emulate over the years are like, Art Blakey's 8x12 on a Blue Note recording or something, right? Well, that
Yep.
certainly didn't have a rim system on it, and it probably had a crappy microphone on it too, right? But I just think the drums sound more
On the
natural.
rail.
Yeah, yeah,
On
yeah,
the rail mount too, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh man, I think that actually would be good, even if it does dampen them a little teeny bit to go direct to shell on the toms. As you said, if they're being mic'd, that might just muffle it a little bit, or
Yeah.
take away a little teeny bit of the resonance. That, man, it might just sound great. Oh man, and the fellow that asked the question says, if anyone's watching, I have a full set of rims mounted on the tail. That is too funny. Now, and here's another debate that I've heard over the years is not having the drums mounted on the bass drum versus having a tom mount on the bass
Right.
drum. And people say, "Oh, I can hear the difference in the bass drum
Yeah.
if they're on." And I'm thinking, I don't. I think you're full of poop. So,
Well, a lot of people will say, "Oh, the bass drum's got to be virgin because we want the resonance," and then they put a pillow in it.
it's so
Right?
good. So true, right?
I mean, hey, we're all drummers. We all do things that maybe don't make sense sometimes, but uh, I like, for me, that just it's easier for me to set up a drum set if the tom's mounted off the bass drum, and that has to do, normally I play a pretty small setup, so that's such a personal choice thing that I don't think there is a right and a wrong. Just like on the GTS, drums are
Right.
so individual. Do what you want to do. It's your kit. I'm not going to be critical of it. It might not be what I would do, but if that's what floats your boat, go for it.
That's awesome. What about the difference in wrapped toms versus a lacquered drum? Do you notice? Have you heard any difference, or are they still they're going to sound awfully close?
I think they sound close. I think when you get into some of the thicker coverings, like the glass and maybe even some sparkles, I think it does
Okay.
deaden it a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I go back to my earlier statement of, well, listen to Art Blakey's 8x12 on an old Blue Note thing, Blue Note recording. It was probably wrapped 8x12. It probably wasn't a lacquer drum. But
Right.
I'm a lacquer freak just because I've worked with lacquer so many years, and I just love the process. That I prefer lacquer drums to wrap drums. Now, having said that, I think I have, I only have two kits that are wrapped. So,
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
right. You have the one with the 26.
Yeah, my 47 broadcaster is wrapped, and it's every bit as resonant as any lacquer drum. And my 1964 White Marine Pearl is wrapped, obviously, and there's no resonance issues there. And I think there's a
No,
slight difference between the two, but I do think when you get into some of the glass covering, more than
they're
anything
thicker.
else,
Yeah.
it's just super. You're adding all this weight and mass to the shell. Uh, I'm not a huge fan of that, but they certainly look beautiful, and a lot of people
Mm,
use them because they're more durable. I mean,
right.
you're not going to see a scratch on the blue glass as much as you would a gloss azure blue kit. So, I understand all
Right.
that. It's personal choice,
Or a
really.
matte white kit, or a
Yeah,
matte. I
yeah,
bought the matte white kit, and it looks like it definitely everything shows on that. That's for sure.
yeah,
What are the sizes of that 47? Keep going back to that
yeah.
broadcaster kit. I'm sorry. What are the sizes? So 26. What are the toms?
Well, it's a 14 by 26, a 9 by 13. Then it came with the original 16 by 16. And then a couple years later, I had Steve Maxwell on the hunt for another 16-16 because I like to have two floor toms.
Yeah.
So I've got two 16 by 16s. So,
Wow.
and
Are they the?
the snare drum's a
Yeah.
7 by 14, which is a crazy drum. It sounds fantastic.
That's the one you're playing in that video. Yes. Of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
little Gretsch team. It
yeah,
does sound incredible. Oh
yeah.
my. If people kind of don't think Gretsch makes great snare drums, they need to put down their superphonics for a minute and listen to what Gretsch offers. Snare drum wise, they're
Yeah,
dynamite.
we've got a ton of
Yeah,
snare drums at this point.
yeah. What are some of your favorites of the newer drums that you make there, snare drum wise, shell composition? What are some of the snare drums that are outstanding to your ear?
Well, one of my favorite drums that we recently released is the Brooklyn Standard snare drum,
Mm.
which is it's the straight up plain old ordinary Brooklyn snare shell, but we put a double 45 edge on the batter and the snare side, and that something about that double 45 gives you a little extra crack. Then along
Mm.
with that, we've got a tube lug, which is a little different than the standard lug, and the 302 hoop. It's very open, very versatile drum, and that thing we've made so many of those. I can't really say how
Yeah,
many we've made, but oh my God, it's crazy.
that's awesome. That's a
Yeah,
maple gum, is it?
no, it's a maple poplar shell.
It's
Yeah,
okay. Sorry, the
yeah,
Brooklyn maple poplar.
yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. And
And
that is
another drum that I'm a big fan of is a deep 3-ply snare drum. We've
yeah.
made like an 8x14, 7x14, 6.5x14. Those drums sound so woody, but at the same time not boxy. You know?
Right. Right. That a broadcaster?
Yeah, broadcaster. Yeah, yeah,
Broadcaster.
yeah.
It keeps coming back to the broadcaster. I'm telling you, it's. Can you tell the difference between a broadcaster kit from the 50s, let's say, to when they switched over to 6-ply in the mid 50s? Have you ever A/B
Yeah.
just and see if there's a difference?
Well, I think part of the reason why there was such a difference in the a 3-ply kit from that early days, they would have a single flange hoop on them
Yeah.
with the clip mounts, and then in the early 50s they went to the stick chopper, which was still a steel hoop. But when Gretsch went to the 6-ply shell, they went to the die cast hoop, which immediately tuned different, focused the sound differently. So
Right.
I think that's why there was a real change, and that was kind of the birth of the modern day Gretsch sound when they went to a 6-ply shell and with a die cast hoop and a 30-degree
Yeah.
edge, and that's also
That.
when we started using silver sealer. So
Yeah.
that it's you couldn't really nail it down to what's causing the difference, because they did about four things different with the drum, and it's really an entirely different drum.
All part of the
Yeah,
recipe, as Mr.
yeah.
Gretsch says. If you took one of those things away, would you get a drastically different sounding drum? For example, if the silver sealer was not there, do you think it would sound drastically different or a little bit?
I think it would sound different. I don't know that it would be drastically different, but it does sound different, because I've heard our shells without silver in them,
Yeah.
in a finished kit, and it does sound different. I'd say maybe it's not quite as resonant.
Right. Not as reflective
Yeah,
inside, perhaps.
yeah, yeah,
It's amazing because I know a lot of people are like, well, why do Gretsch drums sound the way that they do? And I always attest it to it's a combination of the edge, the
yeah,
shell composition, and of course the type of hoop that's on the drum.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. We have another question here. Interested to know the strangest drum part Paul has been asked to make. Have you had to make anything kind of
Strangest drum part. Well, that's a hard one. Uh, I can't say that I've had to do anything super strange, although I did do a weird little kit for a drummer in Nashville, John Hammond. I don't know if you know him,
no?
but John's a great guy, studio guy in Nashville. And I kind of made a freaky little micro kit for him
Hmm.
where everything mounts off the bass drum. And
Okay.
it's like a 4-piece kit, but everything mounts off the bass drum. And I had to modify a couple of tom brackets for it. And that was a real joy to do. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed doing that kind of stuff. But
What
that's probably
sizes were
just,
the drums?
uh, I think it was a 10 by 16, 7 by 10, and maybe a 13-inch 9 by 13 or something, and a little piccolo snare drum.
That's awesome. In the
But that,
USA custom shell makeup?
yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was all USA custom. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Oh, and
How much?
actually, now that I remember correctly, they were single-headed, almost pancake toms. Yeah, like maybe
Oh,
5 inches
no.
deep or something. Yeah, yeah,
I remember when they came out, that was sort of popular, maybe 2004. I was an endorser for Thai drums for five
mm-hmm,
minutes. And I knew that they had the Thai Go Toms. And I thought,
mm-hmm.
man, I'd like to get a set of those Go Toms and put them on a regular bass drum. And people thought it was crazy to consider doing that. And then I see, I think it was Mike Marsh of Dashboard Confessional.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
had a drum kit like that with those.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, see, it wasn't totally crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gretsch has definitely been a company that has been innovative over the years, from the double bass drum kits from Louis
Mm-hmm.
Bellson back in the 40s, and that big cocktail drum in the center, as well as the multiply shell,
Right,
the disappearing hoops, the disappearing the spurs,
right, right.
and the Jimmy Pratt muffler. Are you getting people now wanting to put mufflers back in toms again and snare drums?
Well, we do a decent number of kits with mufflers in them. We really do.
Yeah.
And likewise, we do a lot of kits with the vintage build, with the
Mm.
old disappearing spurs and that kind of stuff. And really, I think that is super cool if that's what you want. I'm always here on the side of functionality, but a lot of those kits are really cool. I mean, if you want a kit that's going to feel and play like a '60s drum set, well, we can do that, and it's definitely a different vibe than if you've got all the heavy legs and all the other stuff going on.
Yeah, it really is. If someone were interested in a vintage kit, but a vintage Gretsch kit, a 12, 14, 20, or something like that, would you recommend that somebody buy a new Gretsch kit in the vintage build instead of, seeking out a vintage kit, which is going to be a lot of dough and maybe a lot of searching?
You know, because I run the Gretsch factory, I would always say, well, hey, you ought to buy a new kit. But if you can find, there's a lot of great old vintage drums that need a home. So I'm on the fence on that. It's up to the consumer, really. I don't know that I would recommend somebody to do one or the other. I'd recommend to them to figure out which one they want and go for
Are
it.
they going to sound that much different? An older kit versus a new, like say a broadcaster, if someone is looking for that that great
Right.
old Gretsch sound?
Well, I would say that in particular, the broadcaster, the 3-ply shells, sound nearly identical to the kits made back in the 40s. They really do. As a matter of fact, when maybe in early 2015, Matt Chamberlain did an A/B video of he had I think a 49 kit that was a 24, 13, 16,
Yeah.
and we made a duplicate kit using the new shells, and he recorded them in his studio, and they were almost identical, right? So in the case of the 3-ply, you're not going to find a big difference. In the case of a USA Custom, if you got a early 60s kit, it's going to sound a little mellower than a brand new one. And so much of that has to do with just the aging of the wood and just the kit, because in general, drums will sound mellower with age.
That's amazing. I've had, I think, every era of Gretsch. I've had 50s Gretsch drums, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and up to today, and they all have their own uniqueness to them. I know Paul
Yeah.
DeLong really loves that early to mid 80s Gretsch, the stuff that's got um, the lacquer over top, or the stain over top of the bearing edges and things. He
Yeah, yeah,
says
yeah.
that's the era that he wants. And I had a kid, and man, they absolutely, and they're kind of sought out by a lot of
Yeah.
Gretsch collectors and studio people. Do you ever get a call from an artist, from a, let's say, Vinny, or somebody saying, could you build me this? Do you ever deal with him directly?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think I've remodeled or refurbished 3 of Vinny's kits. I did his Tony Williams yellow kit that he played with Zappa. Then he
Yes.
had one of his old signature kits from 1998 he sent to me, and we redid that in cobalt blue for the Peter Gabriel and Sting tour. And then just last year, the kit he had at his house, uh, he sent it to me to redo, and that was kind of funny because we're kind of trying to figure out what color he wanted, and I think we both were kind of like, I don't know. And then after we sanded the shells, I sanded all the lacquer off the shells. It turned out the shells were so beautiful that we both kind of came to the like, hey, let's just go natural clear gloss on them. The kit came out just beautiful.
That's
But
amazing. Wow. What
yeah,
are the sizes of that kit?
it's a 18 by 22. I think 7 by 10, 8 by 12, 14, 14, 16, 16.
Incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
That must be such a trip to be able to interact and work for people that you admire and they admire your work.
Yeah.
That must be an amazing thing. That I
Well,
don't
it
know. Do you
is.
ever get tired of doing it too?
No, it's very
You ever
gratifying.
get tired of
I
being
tell
Paul
you,
Cooper?
oh, every day I get tired of being Paul Cooper, but those are some personal issues we're not going to go into. But here's a funny story about Cindy Blackman recently. This was probably 6 or 8 months ago, maybe a year ago. I don't think it was a year ago though. She found this old, I think it was a late 70s Gretsch kit, and it was a 22, 12, 13, 16, no, 12, 13, 14, 16. And it was just
Okay.
kind of a crazy, like blue, solid blue color. And the shells
Okay.
were all, the lacquer was completely cracked on all the shells, and they were dirty. And I mean, this drum set was just in horrible shape. She sent it to me, and after talking to her, it's like she liked the color. So I'd taken a Tom and actually just buffed all the dirt off of it. You had this beautiful shell, but the lacquer was all cracked, and she liked the cracked lacquer. So
Wow.
she wanted us to make a 18 to go with it. So we color matched it, and I was like, how in the hell am I going to get this lacquer to crack? So there's a local gas station here right near the factory, and I took the shell up there and asked them if I could leave it overnight in the freezer that they keep the bags of ice they sell in, right?
Oh no
So
way.
so I left it overnight with a bunch of bags of ice in this freezer. Went and picked it up the next morning, and it just turned out that it cracked beautifully, just like the other drums. So that was kind of funny. I got lucky on that one.
That is incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
We have some messages here from Gretsch Gear. Hello from Pooler, Georgia. Mr. Gretsch sends his best regards, enjoying his lunch and watching us here, which thank you so much for that. And Mr. Charlie Cooley, thankful to hear Mr. Cooper speak about the great Gretsch drums. Thank you, Paul, for everything you do. And
All right,
thank
man.
you, Neil, for putting the series together. We're rocking it. We're having fun. I'm telling you, I had such a great time coming and having the visit when I did back in January of a few years ago. And man, it was amazing to see where it all happens and seeing the old machinery and that drill press, I think the hole that cuts the
Right, yeah.
holes. And I had to touch that thing and try and get some of that great Gretsch mojo. And man, what can I ask you here? Are there anything new, any new projects, any new Gretsch drums, anything happening on the horizon that you can talk about?
Well, I could talk a little bit. I maybe can't talk about all of it, but we've got a
Sure.
couple of artist snare drums coming out. A couple of metal artist snare drums are going to be very, very interesting. And I'm not exact. I think they'll be out early next year. Working on some different colors and some other projects, but really not
Sure.
at liberty
That's
to
exciting.
discuss everything we're working on. But yeah,
Anthony, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
No, Anthony McKelly calls it the Gretsch ice machine. Maybe you should get an ice machine and put it and we could all get that cracked lacquer look.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
Well, you guys can do that up in Canada. Just leave your drums in your car overnight.
Oh yeah, never, never ever. Oh man, I think I might have a handful of times, but yeah, certainly not now. Yeah, we could probably do that fairly soon. It's another month or so, month and a half. It's going to be. When does it get cold down where you are, Paul?
Typically, November, something like that. Through January and February, we might see. It rarely freezes here. Really, not a lot.
You had snow the day after I was there.
Yeah.
Gretsch says never.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. We had a freak snowstorm. We had like 6 inches of snow. I've never seen that in all the time I've lived down here. So
yeah, that's good. Of course, the Canadian brings you snow. We go
Right,
home,
right, right.
and I apologize for that. I think you said that people were making snowmen, and the
Yeah,
factory might have been
yeah,
closed or something like that.
yep, yep.
Treacherous driving. So, Paul, thank you so much for your time, and thanks so much for being willing to hop on Instagram here and talk live to us. This is going to
Yeah,
be re-aired through the Gretsch Afternoon Drum Break YouTube channel here, and through a couple of other pages on Facebook, the Gretsch Drum Friends. And I want to thank Fred and Dinah and for everything, and everybody up here that is involved with Gretsch Drums up here. Thank you so much for your time. And you have a little bit more time to build some more drums today, I assume?
yeah. I got about 30 minutes left. Yeah. Well, thanks
Well,
for
this is,
having me, Neil. I really enjoyed being on it,
thank you.
and we'll do it again sometime.
Okay, you take care, everyone. Tune in
All right,
next
man.
week for another great Gretsch guest. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye.